Imagine walking alone near a riverbank late at night. The air is heavy with an eerie silence, the kind that sends a chill crawling up your spine. Suddenly you hear it, a soft, mournful sobbing that seems to echo from the water. The sound is unmistakable, a woman weeping in sorrow, but you can't see anyone. You strain your eyes in the dim light, and there she is, a woman in a flowing white gown, standing at the water's edge. Her long, dark hair cascades over her shoulders, hiding her face. She cries out, "Mis hijos, ¿dónde están mis hijos? Where are my children?" Her voice filled with agony. You've just encountered La Llorona, the weeping woman, one of the most terrifying spirits in Latin American folklore. Welcome back, you over 1,300 friends and newcomers who haven't subscribed yet. Today we are discussing La Llorona, so turn off the lights, sit back, and join us, shall you? The legend of La Llorona dates back hundreds of years, and like many urban legends, there are countless versions of her story. However, most versions agree on one chilling origin. La Llorona was once a beautiful woman named Maria, who lived in a small village. She fell deeply in love with a wealthy man who lavished her with affection until he grew distant. Some say he was unfaithful, others claim he left her for another woman. Heartbroken and consumed by jealousy and rage, Maria did something unthinkable. In a fit of madness, she took her two young children to the river and drowned them in its cold, unforgiving waters. It was only after the river had carried their lifeless bodies away that she realized the full horror of her actions. Overcome with guilt and grief, she threw herself into the same river, hoping to join her children in death. But instead of peace, Maria found only eternal torment. The heavens condemned her, and she was cursed to wander the earth as a restless spirit, doomed to search for her children forever. Today, La Llorona roams riversides, lakes, and streams, her ghostly form gliding just above the water, perpetually searching for her lost children. She's often described as wearing a tattered white dress, her once beautiful face twisted in sorrow, her eyes hollow and tear-streaked. Her mournful wails, "Ay, mis hijos," can be heard in the dead of night, sending shivers down the spines of those unlucky enough to hear her cries. But La Llorona isn't just a tragic figure. Over the years, her legend has taken on a much darker tone. According to some stories, she doesn't simply weep for her own children, she seeks to replace them. Those who encounter La Llorona are said to be in grave danger, especially children. She lures them close with her sorrowful cries, only to drag them into the water to meet the same fate as her own offspring. Some say that if you hear her wails nearby, you are safe, but if her cries sound distant, she is much closer than you think. For centuries, parents have used the tale of La Llorona as a cautionary story to keep their children from wandering near dangerous bodies of water. The story is also a moral tale about the consequences of unchecked rage and jealousy. But beneath the layers of moral instruction, La Llorona is a ghostly reminder of the power of grief and guilt, her spirit unable to find peace. Her legend is not confined to one place. She is known throughout Mexico, Central America, and even parts of the United States, particularly in the southwestern regions. Wherever there are rivers, streams, or lakes, there are whispered stories of La Llorona. People claim to have seen her pale figure floating along the water's edge, or heard her wails carried on the wind late at night. Throughout the years, countless people have come forward claiming to have experienced the terror of La Llorona firsthand. These chilling encounters are a haunting reminder that this ghostly figure is more than just a legend. She's a presence that still lingers by rivers, lakes, and even lonely roads, waiting for the unsuspecting to cross her path. Let's take a deep dive into some of the most frightening encounters with the weeping woman, and you can decide for yourself whether these are just ghost stories or something far more sinister. One of the most unsettling stories comes from a man who lived in a small village near the Rio Grande in Texas. One hot summer night, after a family gathering, he decided to take a walk along the riverbank to cool off. As he strolled by the water, the air was unusually still. He could hear the soft lapping of the river against the shore, but otherwise, everything was quiet. Then, out of nowhere, a distant sound pierced the night, the sound of a woman crying. The weeping was soft at first, barely audible over the gentle breeze. But as he continued walking, the sobbing grew louder, more desperate, as if the woman was right behind him. Chills ran down his spine, and he stopped in his tracks, trying to pinpoint where the cries were coming from. He looked ahead, and in the moonlight, he saw her. A figure draped in white, standing near the edge of the river. Her long hair flowed like a dark veil over her face. She appeared to be looking into the water, her shoulders shaking as she sobbed. His heart raced, but something, whether it was curiosity or an overwhelming sense of dread, compelled him to call out to her. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice trembling. The figure didn't respond, but the weeping stopped abruptly. Without warning, the woman slowly turned to face him. His breath caught in his throat as the moonlight illuminated her face, or what should have been her face. Instead, there was nothing. No eyes, no mouth, only a smooth, featureless surface where her face should have been. Her hollow, mournful cries filled the air again, louder now, as if coming from everywhere at once. Terrified, the man turned and ran as fast as he could, his pulse pounding in his ears. When he finally reached the safety of his home, he looked back toward the river, but the figure was gone. He had no doubt in his mind that he had encountered La Llorona. Another spine-chilling tale comes from two children in Mexico who had an encounter with La Llorona that has haunted them ever since. The story took place during a family camping trip near a river known for its beauty during the day and its eerie atmosphere at night. The family had pitched their tent not far from the water, and as dusk fell, the children played while their parents set up a campfire. As the night grew darker, the children began to hear what sounded like a woman's voice coming from the direction of the river. They stopped playing, listening closely. The voice was soft, almost a whisper, but unmistakable. It was the sound of a woman crying. "Mis hijos, ¿dónde están mis hijos?" "My children, where are my children?" The words echoed eerily across the water. Confused, the children walked closer to the riverbank, hoping to see where the voice was coming from. As they neared the water, they saw her, a woman dressed in white, her back turned to them. Her long black hair spilled down her back, and her head was bowed as if in sorrow. She seemed to be floating just above the surface of the river, her bare feet not touching the ground. One of the children, thinking the woman might need help, called out to her. The figure stopped crying and slowly turned around. What they saw next terrified them to their core. The woman's face was pale, her eyes sunken and red from endless weeping. But what scared them most was her mouth, stretched wide in a scream that never came. Instead, her sobbing grew louder, as if the river itself was wailing with her. Frozen in fear, the children stood still as the woman began to drift toward them. She moved silently, her feet never touching the ground, her hands reaching out as if to grab them. In that moment, the children turned and bolted back to their parents, shouting that they had seen a ghost. Their parents didn't believe them at first, thinking it was just their imagination playing tricks on them. But when they packed up the next morning, an elderly local man approached them and warned them to be careful around the river at night. When they mentioned the weeping woman, his face went pale. "That's La Llorona," he said gravely. "Many have heard her cries, but few live to tell the tale." La Llorona is often considered an omen of death, her presence signaling impending tragedy. In one chilling encounter from the outskirts of Mexico City, a woman claimed to have seen La Llorona shortly before a terrible accident took the lives of several family members. It was a cold, foggy night, and the woman was driving home after a late shift at work. As she drove along a quiet stretch of road near a small river, she saw a figure standing on the side of the road, dressed in a long white gown. At first, she thought it was just someone out for a walk or in need of help. But as her car drew nearer, something about the figure made her uneasy. The woman appeared to be gliding, her feet hidden beneath the hem of her dress, and her face was obscured by her dark hair. Despite the growing sense of dread, the driver rolled down her window slightly and slowed the car, planning to ask the woman if she needed assistance. But just as she was about to speak, the figure turned, revealing a face twisted in agony. The woman's eyes were hollow, and her mouth stretched wide in an unnatural scream, though no sound came out. Panicking, the driver slammed on the gas and sped past the figure, not daring to look in the rearview mirror. She felt a cold presence inside the car, as if something or someone was with her. When she finally reached home, she told her family what she had seen. But before anyone could offer an explanation, the phone rang. It was a hospital. Her sister and 2 nieces had been involved in a fatal car accident just moments earlier. Shaken to her core, the woman now believes that La Llorona's appearance was a warning, an omen of death that foreshadowed the tragedy that would soon strike her family. One of the most terrifying La Llorona encounters occurred when a family in New Mexico reported a late-night visit from the Weeping Woman. It was a stormy night, and the wind howled through the trees as the family huddled inside, listening to the rain batter against the windows. Around midnight, the mother heard a faint sound that she first mistook for the wind, a soft, mournful sobbing. She listened carefully, her heart pounding in her chest as the sound grew louder, more distinct. It was the unmistakable cry of a woman weeping, and it seemed to be coming from just outside their home. The mother stood frozen in the living room, straining to hear, when suddenly the sobbing stopped. All was quiet for a moment, but then she heard it, a light tapping on the window. Hesitant, she slowly turned toward the sound, and there, through the rain-streaked glass, she saw a woman's face, pale and drawn, with tear-streaked eyes staring back at her. The woman's long black hair clung to her wet face, and her lips trembled as if she were about to speak. But before the mother could react, the figure let out a bone-chilling wail and disappeared into the night. Terrified, the mother ran to her children's room, fearing for their safety. But when she entered, she found them sound asleep, completely unaware of the ghostly visitor. She stayed awake the rest of the night, but La Llorona never returned, at least not that she saw. Encounters with La Llorona leave a chilling mark on those who claim to have witnessed her weeping form. Whether she is seen near rivers, heard in the distance, or encountered up close in the dead of night, La Llorona remains one of the most terrifying figures in folklore. Her sorrow is eternal, her search for her lost children never-ending, and her presence a harbinger of doom for anyone unlucky enough to cross her path. Would you be brave enough to approach a weeping woman by the river? The next time you hear a cry on the wind, think twice before you follow it. You might just find La Llorona waiting for you. If this story gave you chills, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more haunting stories from around the world. Have you ever experienced something strange or unexplainable? Share your spooky encounters in the comments below. Stay safe, and until next time, my friends.